And I actually want to go and start it off with like, is this all really hogwash? Really? Yeah. I mean, do we really have such an issue of patriarchy, blah, blah, blah? Because, silence. No, because for example, like I come from a matriarchal society. You know, in Malaysia, it's from Negeri Sembilan, you know, where the women control all of the wealth and the assets, and the men are just, well, you just do whatever the women tell you to do, lah. You know, and in Malaysia also we have Kelantan, we have in Penang especially also, you know, where women actually control everything in that sense. I was working also in Bank Negara when it was under the auspices of Tan Sri Zeti. You know, a very, very powerful central banker. One of, I think she was voted best central banker 3 times in a row in the world during that time. You know, and various, and also even now we have the central banker who's also headed by a lady, right? So when we look in terms of finance, Grameen Bank already also states that if you want to go and make money, lend to the women. Because the men are, again, useless sorts. You know, you give them money and they spend it on God knows anything else except what they're supposed to be spending on. We just heard the latest news. Berjaya, the Berjaya Group now has an all-women board, right? In fact, you know, when I was in the executive position not too long ago, I made a comment where majority of the people in the executive roles were actually women rather than men, and I was saying that we need to go and come up policies to protect the men after a while. Because what was happening to all the boys, right? Rafida Aziz also just mentioned, and this was where it was after the previous session, we talked about quota, right? Rafida Aziz said, women should not be ranked by quota. They should be brought up to the boards because of their capabilities and credibility. Yeah, and so all of these statements, all of these facts, seems to be pointing that women are already becoming a force in their own right. So why are we still having this conversation? I mean, why are we still having it here? You know, talking with 80% of this hall is women, by the way, and you know, I can still remember the last event MAFCAP did here, it was 80% was men, and I was like, where are all the women? And the management must have heard me, because I'm so glad to go and see so many women here, so please give a hand to yourself. So, to get this conversation started, I would like to go and open up first with our 2 panelists, the first 2 panelists who are directly involved in technology, and you are leading such large corporations in technologies at a global level. We would love to hear from you, your personal stories and how you got to that position, the sort of challenges that you faced, and maybe a few tips that you can share with the audience. So if I can open up to either Cindy or Juliet, you know, up to you, whoever wants to start first.
I'll go first. This is the hot seat, the seat that's closest to the moderator. They always never give you time to respond. Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm honored to be on this panel today. And you know, when you were in financial industry, you know, despite your rank from the investment team, anyone who's an investor here knows your team is very lean. You don't really have a lot of people reporting to you. You run a few analysts, the work is very individualistic. I never thought of myself as a people manager. And here today, according to our org chart, there are 500 people directly, indirectly reporting to me. And it's very scary. And personally, it has been quite a bit of, definitely a lot of growth, personal growth, and a lot of struggles, you know, going through, embracing this journey. I think I went through 3 stages. The first is apprehension, like what am I doing? Like how, especially with, you know, team members who are just, you know, so much more senior and experienced than myself, and such an expert in the field. How am I leading? Like who am I to guide? That's the first stage, and it took me about 2 years, and COVID didn't help. And the second stage was really making peace with the fact that I'm put in a position to do a job, and where my position was to really show the direction of the company. And I focus on serving that function, provide my purpose, serve the rest of the team with that, you know, a ton of humility, and, you know, just play my role. And eventually, and that has been very humbling experience. But in the process, there are people coming up to you and telling you all these really inspiring words and say, hey, what you're doing is really cool. Really good to see you leading this company. And you realize you're given a platform to play a role bigger than yourself. And you're put under that spotlight. And what you do with that spotlight is on you. So the third stage of leadership is really to push myself to do things like this, to really speak up for our female employees, for our female customers who are underserved in our industry, and to do a lot more, because that's the responsibility for having that spotlight.
Cindy, would you say that to a certain extent, that's a similar journey for you, or it's something different?
I guess the reason why we still have this conversation about diversity in the VC world is, first of all, I still see very few female in the VC world. Before coming to this panel, I tried to look up some statistics in the US, because we talk about a lot statistics in Malaysia or Southeast Asia, but even in the US, we see the same thing. PitchBook reported that last year only less than 2% of the VC funding goes to female founded ventures, and only like 15% of the VC firms in the US are headed or founded by a female. And more interestingly, there is a Harvard Business Review article talking about how female is being, marginalized in this startup field. They study 2,000 companies which are female founder, and if these female founded companies, they raise the first round of funding from female VCs, it is 2 times more difficult or less likely that they can get a second round of financing. So I guess we talk about all these female leaders in big corporates, and even in Hong Kong, most of the banks in Hong Kong, big banks, are headed, the CEO are female. Yet in the VC or startup world, I think we still need to really speak up and give a more lift to women founders.
So can I address this very typical, maybe it's a stereotype, where, people are like saying, you know what, if it's about money, if it's about details, it's about getting things done, get the women to go and look at it. But when it comes to innovation, taking risks, going out into the unknown, men are much better at it. And if I may point it out, 2 of you seems to be living that stereotype, because you are both the CFOs, it's all about the money and all that. What do you say to that? I mean, do women have something which is not quite what you need in the VC world, which the men has to go and take that so much risk and going into the unknown? What's your thoughts?
I go first. I think stats have shown female-led companies has a faster growth rate over a longer period of time. I think there are innate differences for being a woman. We are more realistic and practical and very sensible in forecasting, right? And for a company to grow from 1 to 10 to 10 to many, you need that consistency. You need that balance in thoughts. And I think there is a role to play for both men and women, and this is one of the gaps we're trying to correct. And part of one of the questions earlier was about why VCs as an industry rewards more male-driven entrepreneurs, because VC's return profile is 80-20. I think there's always, you seek out the aggressors. You seek out, a company that's going to give you 100 times return. And you definitely look out for patterns that, whoever is a strong salesman, you try to kind of reward that pitch. And I think over time, when you observe how a company grows in a 10-year horizon, 20-year horizon, data will show you very differently. So I think, right, we are in financial roles. We also drive growth initiatives in each of our field. So I think we happen to be in that role. We also have a lot of female leaders, in Carson's case, in product and tech, in data, in engineering, and even in inspection and in our technical workforce. So it's that's exactly the bias we're trying to correct, and that's exactly the stereotype we're trying to break.
Yeah, I think women are more conservative, I would say. I actually talked to a lot of female entrepreneurs in Hong Kong, and a lot of them are, telling me that, we don't really want to pitch our ideas until we are 120% sure that, our message will be accepted or get across. But a lot of times, guys may, just have hang out with over happy hour, and then they can, easily pitch to VCs their ideas, even though they are like 50%, prepared on that. So that is one thing. But I don't know, honestly, because we have been running this global pitch competition called Jumpstarter, and every year we receive thousands of applications around the world, and this year it will be the 6th edition that we are going to host it. For the last 5 years, if I look at the figures, it's the number of applications with female-led ventures, or even with one of the founders, with female founders, is only about 18%, 18%, and it has not grown over the last 5 years. So I hope this year we'll see an improvement. And then when we try to, give an award of the best female entrepreneur award, we are not able to find a venture that we can give out this award. So one argument is that, okay, Cindy, if you give that venture or the founder an award, it is like a consolation award, meaning I'm not good enough to be a winner, so that's why you give me a female entrepreneur award. I don't know, I want to hear what other panelists will think about it, or other ladies will think about it, but I don't know. I just feel that women are really more conservative, and if I look at, if internally I am also more conservative. When we started off with coming with this Jumpstarter idea, this is from one of a male colleague in my team, thinking that we should make a bigger impact and do global pitch competition. I said, oh, we have a very lean team, we're going to be able to pull this out. And so I will always ask these questions, and and then the other team members will try to convince me to be more bold. And of course, after a few years, of course, I am getting more confident in, getting this bigger and bigger every year. But I think it is something really our broad bring up, and also the education that, limit our mindset to be more bold. And of course, I hope, as Julia just mentioned, by stepping out and talking, to talk more, not only I can help to build up the confidence of myself, but also hopefully can also encourage more women to join our journey.
Wonderful. And we're going to go to Salma. You heard all of this, right? Government has been doing so many things, from quotas to putting it in the Code of Corporate Governance. You've been doing a lot of sessions to educate. Diversity is key, but we're still having this conversation. So what's happening here? What's the challenges? And is this something that the government is able to handle? Do you think, in that sense, even though you're not government, you're a government body, but I think you can speak with the voice of the government in that sense. Well, what's your thoughts, Salma?
Assalamualaikum. First of all, let me add my thanks to the organizers and sponsors. I think it's crucial to bring a group of people who are like-minded together to then raise the issue and get a lot more awareness. And I think both the thing that you said and what was said by the two panelists about diversity, and that was the point that the SC started with, that the fact that diversity is needed at the board level, not so much about gender. The focus wasn't necessarily that, it was the need to have a diverse gender, skill sets, and age. And that led then to the thinking of having the women on board. And we've incorporated that into the listing requirement. Having one woman on board is a requirement, but having 30%, as you mentioned, in the corporate governance code is best practice. And I do want to share some data on, despite the fact that it's been rather challenging, we've had good progress. And I think we started this journey about 10, 12 years ago. There was about 56% of all listed companies had all male boards. We've now reached almost 30% of the top 100 PLCs having 30% women. So I think just again some statistics to rattle up to support the statistic that was presented earlier this morning. We have 56 PLCs in the top 100 having 30% women. 200 PLCs overall having 30% women. And I think the other number to celebrate is 44 PLCs have women chairmen. And I think that's where it starts, having diversity at the board level. And why we feel that diversity in women and skill sets and age is to what the panelists have said. The ability to then present diverse views at the board. Women are naturally more conservative, we know. And from the work that we're doing in the VC space, it is a space that you need to overpromise sometimes. You need to be able to convince. And that's where I think we are seeing the work that we've done in the PLC space as a trailblazer for the venture space. And I think when we talk about quota, it's always a two-sided issue. I think quotas and regulations are deemed to have costs. In the VC space, I think the panelists talked about the fact that it's a small, lean startup. So is that somewhere necessarily you want to impose a requirement, a quota? So, but I think the journey that we're taking here in the listed space is a good journey where it is then encouraging, and I think we've set aspirational targets of having 30%, and I think that will then have spillovers. We do see women in, I think we ran a thematic review of women in senior management, and that also shows very good promise that 23% senior management in the 100 is women, and there are women across senior management. And why I think point 2 is critical is these are the decision-making points. Financial officer, human resource, I mean, what's the recruitment strategy? And I think it all comes down to the fact of taking risks. I think naturally women are more conservative, and so you've started to see the level of women in professional very high, but the ability to, women have the potential, but the ability to leave their job to take risks with a startup. So is that something, do we have the right environment? Is there enough incentives? Is there enough perhaps coaching or mentoring that's in place to help women make that jump from being a professional person in a steady income to taking the risk? And I think we've been also very fortunate that we've had support from the institutional investors who've also been very supportive of us to through the engagement voting policies. The institutional investors have a policy of playing a strong role in the nomination committee, as you would know. So I think that's where we are seeing a lot of support from both the institutions. But again, it comes down, it cannot be regulator-led. It has to be engagement, discourse like this, and having a lot more plans in place.
So now I want to move on to Tom and Ashwa. Okay, I'm going to take both of you at the same time because I think, the men have to come together here. Okay.
Well, the man with most money is here.
Totally. But the question that, and again, don't get me wrong, we're not here to go and attack Tom. Don't worry, Tom. I'm going to treat you very nicely because he is one of the male allies. So you are one of the male allies. But I think what would be quite interesting, and also Asha, please jump in also, is in your perspective, when you are sitting up there, making your choice on where to go and put your money in. So like some of the data that Cindy had also mentioned, in America, how many, an infinitesimal amount is only given to women. And it's 2 times worse when they are going for their second round of funding, right? It's something like that. So help us understand, in that position, when you guys are there, what goes through your mind when a man and a woman coming up with the solutions that is being provided, and what is getting in their way from getting the money that they should be getting? So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
No, I think, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. And, when Ali Zakri, there was a question earlier, and it was like sort of deja vu for me. I think the question essentially was, hey, can women innovate, right? And I know Juliet and Cindy were trying to answer the question. And it was a deja vu moment because it made me think back like 20 years ago when I first started. That same question was asked by Silicon Valley investors for Chinese entrepreneurs, which was, can Chinese entrepreneurs innovate? Right? And the same question has appeared throughout history, right? One of the things that, again, Cindy has been visionary. I think she's just a bit modest, right? She's the one who came up with the idea. The question then was, hey, can Hong Kong entrepreneurs innovate, right? And then you think about when Juliet joined Carsum, the same question, can Malaysians innovate? Large, and then can Southeast Asian entrepreneurs? So it was deja vu because that's a question, Ali. I know you didn't mean it, but that's a question you'd never ask a man, right? You'd never ask a male entrepreneur, can you innovate, right? And the reason why it's deja vu is because I remember getting that same question. It was like, hey, can companies from China innovate? Question's been answered, right? And so for us at Gobi, our history has been, because we've been, maybe our history is we've always been outsiders. If you're a misfit, you feel like you don't belong. I mean, that's kind of the history of how Gobi started. So when you look at our progression, we understand what it's like to be an outsider, to not be given a chance, right? And so we saw that play itself. So for women out there, it's not just for women, okay? It's happened throughout history, right? And so when you look at it, at first it was Chinese entrepreneurs were questioned. Right, Hong Kong entrepreneurs, Southeast Asian, right, Malaysian entrepreneurs. I mean, that's been a question, right? Oh, Malaysia, nobody's good enough in Malaysia. If you look around this room, that question has been resoundingly proven to be incorrect. There are great entrepreneurs in Malaysia, right? And so the question is, well, can women innovate? Look, I love it. I love that question because as long as people think that, that's more opportunity for Gobi. I mean, we view that as opportunity when there's a perception gap, right? And that question, I think, I hope, and Yuki's here, we're going to get to a day where women are never going to get asked that question. Like, can women innovate? Can you take risks? It should be assumed, because a man is never asked that question. And so when we look at companies, look, we've been very lucky. I've had a great opportunity to work with amazing women like Juliet and Cindy. And we've invested, some of our companies are here. I'm just looking at, there's Sasha there, right? From Faithful. We have Ying Yi from Avana, right? We have Patrina, right, from New York. We have Winnie from Policy Street. I don't know if Jasmine's here from Recommend, but when we invested into those female founders, we never did it because they were women. We did it because they were the best companies.
Exactly.
So we invested into, they just happened to be women, and when you think about what Saul's saying is like, hey, listen, right? I love the 30% club, right? But when you look at the demographics, it should be the 50% club, right? It should be, just because at Gobi we just believe in demographics, right? Which is why when you looked at the demographics, wow, China made sense. That's why people went to India. That's why people are now in Southeast Asia. That's why we're doing Taqwa Tech, right, aimed at Muslims. What's bigger than Taqwa Tech? I was thinking last night, preparing for this panel, I was like, what's after Taqwa Tech, right? Innovation aimed at Muslim communities. You know what it is? It's women.
Okay, Tom, I'm going to interrupt you with this love fest at this point of time.
Right.
Because you're still not answering the question.
Okay.
You are one of the enlightened people. But I think there's like 10 other people out there who doesn't think like you, who doesn't see it as opportunity. So what's the underlying issues as a representative of your industry? What's their problem?
Well, look, I think again there are some people who are ahead of the curve, and hopefully we get rewarded for that. And then there are some people, look, I mean, the investment is not just VC. Most people are followers. Right, that's why all of you guys here, you're trailblazers. This is a like-minded community here. Every single person in this room, right? And again, I think Malaysia benefits, right? Because we're lucky. VCs can't do it by themselves. We're only part of the puzzle. We still have to get support from the people who give us money, who are the LPs, right? I'm very lucky that I'm working with Cindy. Cindy is even more enlightened. Right? We're very lucky in Malaysia when you think about it. MavCap has people like Amy, right? We have, founders here like Quibi who set it up in Malaysia. And you know what Malaysia also has that, again, that's why I always say Malaysians are so modest. Think about it. Some of the most powerful LPs in Malaysia are women, right? Rohaya, right? At EPF, right? You know her, your colleague, right?
My personal favorite.
Right? Nick
Yes.
at QuAP. Having women in those leadership positions is already better than a lot of other places. So I think when you see that creates that. And now for why other people don't see it, I don't know. I actually don't want that many people to see it because Gobi would like to invest into all those great companies and then people see it later. I mean, right? It's kind of what we did in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong. I don't mind that. I think they will come around, but I agree. We have to be an ally because this is an issue. We have to accelerate it. But I hope, Gobi, we find all the great companies that just happen to be founded by women before everybody else.
Yeah.
And for us, look, we're doing it not because we have to. We're doing it because we want to.
That's where the money is.
Right?
That's where the money is. So, Ashwat, I mean, okay, I'm sure you have interviewed so many people out there. At one point of time, your CEO also was, of course, a lady also, So what's the secret formula here? Not only just from a VC and tech, so we've heard from Tom, but maybe at a more, I don't know, higher level. What's the secret?
Well, exactly, I guess, let's put it this way. Malaysia was in a mess, in a state of instability, because full of men in the parliament. As simple as that. So let's be truthful to ourselves. Like what I would like to second what Tom has said. Clearly, we have to reflect the demography of that particular geography, right? So the question here is two things. One, whether we are afraid to make decision, whether we are brave enough to take bold decision, and we are not afraid to make mistakes. I guess, well, in my world of broadcasting, very small in Malaysia, I'm the youngest editor-in-chief in the club.
Yep.
The question here is to fight with the big boys who sees or somehow perceive whether this young chap at the age of 37 can do it or not for Astro AWANI. It will run 24/7 news organization. So the question here is not about gender, right? And let's put it this way. I've seen myself personally how the transformation happened within my small family. Back in 1997, when my family, my late father and my mom, we had this so-called economic crisis. In 2 years' time, it has transformed, and my mother took charge of the family up to the point as we speak today. So within these 2 years, I was talking to Datuk Marina Mahathir. My mother was holding the book, Marina Mahathir in Liberal Doses. She was in charge of the family. It's just 2 years, and straight away she's the leader of the family. But to be fair, my family is a very small family. I'm the single child, and I have no siblings, so it was good. It was great support system when the pressure wasn't that huge. But let's take a look at the bigger picture in this country is that where's the child care comprehensive policy to help to retain women in not just leadership but in the workforce? For goodness sake, we've been talking about this for years. We've been talking about this for the past 1 decade. Where are the action? Hence why it goes back to the fundamental of leadership. Whether you have whether you have really bold enough to take that decision and really be serious about taking action and connect all dots. Because it's not about being man, being woman to be leader. It's about what is most important to really drive not just this country and the society, but to put and deploy our influence internationally as Malaysian.
Absolutely. So how much time do we have before we go to Q&A? So 15 minutes. So now I'm going to go and open it up to the whole panel as a whole. Please chip in. I was having an interesting chat with my fellow director, Dr. Darawati. And through that chat, something came up. Okay, I'm not putting words in your mouth. It's coming from me. Okay, where we were just talking about risk-taking, where women has always been seen to be taking care of the family. Taking care, making sure that no crisis happens with them, like what you had mentioned. And they will do everything in their power to make sure that the family structure is maintained. But when you take risks, women will never take that one shot to win everything. Because if they get that risk wrong, the entire family might die. So is that sort of thinking then not really helpful for women in the tech space? Because tech space is all about taking risks. It is all about putting your bets into that one pot, And whereas like the female idea is always to take care of the family, not to go and put all your bets in one pot. It is about diversification. Is that a stereotype, or is there some truth in that?
I'll jump on. I think that being truth or a belief, that's actually not true. We can put it aside. I do think that today's digital economy is over-indexed on growth and under-indexed on risk control. So many things are happening. FTX is happening. There's not enough thinkers behind the wheel and say, hey, before we drive at 200 miles, can we take a safety check? Can we have a look at whether the engine is set up properly? And I was thinking, if just many years ago, if we had women in the boardroom, even if we had more women in senior leadership positions of gaming companies, wouldn't parental control feature be coming forward a lot sooner? Wouldn't our youth today be a lot healthier? Like, wouldn't today's digital economy be a lot more sustainable instead of all the hypes and all the downfalls that we're seeing today? So I think ever more importantly, in the digital economy that's taking a larger part of the real economy, we need to think about how to keep things moving for the long run and not just a 10-year cycle.
I suppose we're not here to raise or address like bigger issues, right? Like societal issues, but I think it was touched on. Women are seen as the traditional caregivers, and I think what we saw in the pandemic is if one parent had to sacrifice, it would naturally be seen as women. I mean, I don't have evidence, I don't have data. And that's the other thing that I realized in the reading over the weekend, that there's not enough data, there's not enough analysis to, in this space, we talk about pipeline, where are the education focus for girls? What exposure are they given? The technical type programs, are girls exposed to that? Are parents of girls willing to allow them to get into that space? Because, again, comes back to the traditional mindset of, at least one of the couple will have a stable job, and it's always the men seen to be, you take the risk and I will ensure that the things that was raised, the family structure remains intact. So I think it is a national conversation about if women are going to take the risk, is there enough support mechanism for women? I mean, and that's the reality is is there enough childcare? Is there enough safeguards? Is there enough flexibility? I think one thing we see from the pandemic is, it's almost a reset. The digital technology can either be an enabler or a disruptor. Women who are coming back require flexibility, but are they getting enough support? I think, the way we work, how we're educated, how people consume products is all going to rely on technology. So I think there needs to be more conversations like this, and then pipe into parties that can make a difference at the national level, be it the ministries or the various jabatans. Because I think it's about. I think there are. I think Malaysia is ahead. I think in the SDG 4, the Sustainable Development Goal 4 relates to education, and I think we do put out the measures that we have in place and our performance. So I think it's about having conversations and having the right policies in place and having the right parties push those policies.
Actually, I know Salma sits here. I'm going to grill you slightly a bit more. Not grill. Ask you for your opinion. No, because so is this really such a binary question? It's about patriarchal oversight, and we have to dismantle it. Because taking into account the evolution of how the family structure has come up, it's no longer about women take care of the family and men go out and hunt for the mammoths or whatever. Do you think it's about time now that we should actually have legislation and regulation to allow for men to take over the household duties also? Because you can see nowadays, you will always have this, what was it when women give birth? Maternity, thank you. Oh gosh. Shouldn't we also have similar requirements to allow the men to take over the roles of what was traditionally seen for women? What do you think about that? Is it such an easy thing as that binary patriarchal, matriarchal, break it down and so on, or is it about blending it all together and looking at the roles are no longer as black and white as that?
I don't profess to know the answer to the question you asked, but as cliche as it is, I think it's a multi-stakeholder engagement, right? I think the government has started to put in place, and again, I don't speak for the government, and I think as I'm speaking, I realize I don't even speak for the SC, so please take whatever I am saying as my personal thoughts. I think there are things in place to enable husbands to support, which is why I said earlier, men have to be part of the conversation. The old saying of behind every man, I think right now, I mean, I speak personally, behind every woman, I think if you're going to have, tick all the right boxes, have a good family, good kids are raised well, you do also need support from, a spouse and extended family. So I think that needs to, those things need to be addressed. It needs a lot more engagement. Is it late in the day for a country like Malaysia? I believe so. But I think we're also slightly ahead of the curve in many parts. I think the data shows women in professional, again, DOSM data shows, I think 40% women in professional. For men, I think it goes to either 60 or 80. I better not rattle the number because I did take it down last night because the number is rather old for DOSM. Yeah, so it is a multi-stakeholder conversation.
So I guess it is, when you set out the culture, it is very important that you have to have a rights culture at the very first start when you build your venture. It is being equal to everyone, you value everyone as an individual, and you just make sure that everyone can thrive in the environment. So a support system, a very good support system is very important. So in our headquarters in China, we do have make sure there are nursing room in every floor, and we do have childcare systems in the vicinity. It's not run by the company, but we do make sure that there will be support system in the vicinity to help female co-workers to be able to really, be able to work and work efficiently without really thinking too much about how to take care of their family.
Wonderful. So, if I can just ask you guys to sort of share a tip to our audience out there. If they were to be in a similar position and now asking for money, asking for funding, and they are women-led and women leaders, what do you think that's that one tip that you would actually say for them to actually turn the gender issue into a gender opportunity? So, if they are presenting to somebody who's not as enlightened as Tom, for example, somebody who would actually sort of say, yeah, I'm actually the president of the boys club here. So what would that one tip you would give that would actually turn the tables and look at women leadership and women in tech as an opportunity rather than as a liability? Open it up. Yeah, Tom.
Well, maybe 2 points. I think the first, you just for women founders out there, you just got to be persistent, right? So let me just say one thing: fundraising is hard for anybody. Okay, right. So listen. When you pitch to a VC and the VC doesn't respond to you, it's not because you're a woman necessarily. It's because we don't answer anybody, male or female. So it's not directed, right? So I think sometimes when they get discouraged because they're like, listen. It was the same thing in the old days when Chinese entrepreneurs were pitching. It's just, look, you get turned down not because you're Chinese or because you're Malay. It's because VCs, and I see a lot of them, they're like, hey, there's Rachel there, Hamza. Hey, we're busy people. We don't respond practically to anybody. So that it has nothing to do if you're a woman or a man. We don't respond to men most of the time either. So just keep that in mind. Do not get discouraged. I think that's the first thing. And I think, you were mentioning about men, maybe why they're not. I think, look, for all the men in the room, I can speak on behalf of that. Maybe there's a little bit of fear. The fear is that women will replace us. Right? I mean, you think about it. Look, I see my daughter and my son, and there was a point about education, how that's already happening. I think if you look at like the top universities in the U.S. at least, there's more women than men.
Absolutely.
Right? And I actually think one day there's going to be like affirmative action for men because the boys are just so behind the girls. And I think that's what's going to happen. But let me just, because I think for a lot of the guys out there, you're thinking, and it was the same thing for Silicon Valley. When China's ecosystem was rising, and to a certain extent, the US-China trade war is the same thing. Here's the problem. Everybody thinks it's a zero-sum game, right? It's like, if Silicon Valley and China, if China does better, that's less for me. And actually, it turned out that when China did well and India did well, the entire pie got bigger. So for all the men VCs out there, women are not gonna, right? We're still useful, okay? Think about it. Investing into women entrepreneurs, it doesn't mean men have less opportunity. There's more opportunities. The pie will, you think about it, you empower 50% of the population, the pie is going to get even bigger. So don't think about it as a zero-sum game. It was the same thing, right, for Southeast Asian startups. It was like, the same thing. Chinese entrepreneurs like, I don't want to invest into Southeast Asia. Now everybody's looking at it because while they see the linkages, right, between China and Southeast Asia, the pie gets bigger. It's only when the pie doesn't grow that we get into this competitive, right? Yeah, right. So that, and I would just say it's not a zero-sum game.
On top of that, I guess, besides persistent, for ladies, most important is stay focused on the idea. And for men, be open to listen and accept the idea. So these two parts intertwine, and you create a whole good synergy in achieving whatever goals or targets that you're putting on the table. I think what Tom has said clearly is a great reflection of what happened on ground, even in organization. You tend to have this perception before, for a man as a leader, you tend to have this perception saying that, another round of you know nothing, I know everything. So we have to stop that kind of unhealthy environment. And I think above all, this is not just about man and woman. When you create that synergy, when you create a bigger pie, we will succeed and prosperous in terms of we become rich together. Why not, right? So most important is to create a better environment.
Cindy and Juliet, tips.
Yeah, so I'll start. Because I've seen both sides from the investor's perspective as well as entrepreneur's perspective by now. One advice is do not start from a position of defense. Do not assume that the world is trying to go against you. If anything, it's really lack of awareness or they just don't know, right? So have mercy, have a bit of patience, like walk through your idea and really, turn, whoever you're talking to into your ally. And embrace the spotlight. In CARSM, we have a female leadership training program where we actually talk to the female leaders in the same way. Don't assume the workforce is going against you. Like they just don't know. So have a bit of patience. We're in the early days, be kind to our male allies and, teach them what to do.
Be kind to the man.
Yeah, and it's very rare to see very open aggressions in workplace and people trying to be mean to you because you're a woman these days. Like really, you don't see that. But it's a lot of unnoticed biases that's still getting in the way. But these are undetected, and men, women, generally it's not very visible unless you're the one directly impacted. So have a bit of patience and be vocal, talk about it openly, discuss it, make it a conversation and not an accusation.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think most of the panelists have covered what I want to say, so the only tip is go to someone like Tom to pitch. Yes.
Salma, any last words from your side?
I think we are days away or years away from a dedicated allocation, right, for women in tech, unless Tom has a statement to be made after this announcing a fund for women. But I think it's certainly a conversation that needs to keep happening.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to our questions. When can we?
So let's go to some questions. I think that would be much more interesting as well to answer any kind of pressing questions that you have. I think I'm going to put Tom in the spotlight again, and this was a question that was asked earlier. That statistics seems to show women-founded companies perform better, but why do VC funding for these companies remain low overall? What can we do to improve these numbers? So I think the best fitted person to answer this question would be Tom. Would you want to take it, Tom?
I think so. The first part is, absolutely. When we just look at the Gobi portfolio, some of our top performing companies are like Carsome, right? Like Airwallex, right? Lucy Liu, it's from the Hong Kong portfolio. Like Aerodyne, right? Based here in Malaysia, right? These companies, again, have female co-founders and doing fantastic.
Yeah.
So we definitely see that, but why do they remain low overall? I don't know. I mean, you've got great examples like Canva out there. It's, I see that as opportunity. And I think, I think when you just keep at it, look, money goes to what's easy, money lags. Money tends to move in herds. I mean, there's always a herd investing, right? So there's always a lag. Right now, everybody is still investing into Silicon Valley, into, crypto, because that's cool. Everybody, look, I mean, that's just the way the industry works.
Yeah.
We got to make that, you got to make that cool. And people, most money capital is conservative. They need permission.
Right, so we'll look into some of the questions. I think the next one, I'm going to skip that because I would say yes to that. We'll take the next one. It says, traditional mindset across gender and generation. How do we overcome this? Any thoughts from the panel?
So this is the culture element, right, we were talking about? Yeah? Anybody wants to take a stab at this?
Okay, I'll start. So I read this study. I found it really interesting. In the 70s, when they asked, this is done in UK, when they asked kindergarteners to draw a picture of a doctor, 90% of women drew a man, yeah. And even if they're just girls. And in the 90s and late every 10 years they did the same study. And the later years, 37% are doctors are female. And I think that's progress. It doesn't happen overnight, but because role models are more visible. You do have what you started the panel with, all these notable high achievers, female representatives in different fields, and young girls can grow up to think that I can be that, right? So that really changes over a generation.
What else can we ask?
Right, I'm going to combine this question, and this will be towards Juan Salma. He said, earlier you mentioned in more regulated market, easier to impose diversity. How can we replicate or adopt this in private sector, such as VC and startups? I think it's quite the same in terms of how can we ensure diversity in leadership.
I think I meant more mature segments. I think it's easier because they've got track record, they have the ability to take risks. But I think you can't do that in a growing segment, in a frontier segment. And I think, to be fair, while the Women Tech Fund is an aspirational objective, I don't think even the women on the panel will agree to compromising returns. I don't think no investors will will get into a deal that does that. I think what can happen is the various things that we've spoken about. I think conversations, engagements, dialogue, aspirational targets and measures. I mean, things like where you have mentoring, where you have clinics, you ensure that at least the participation of women in those clinics and beauty parades for say, technology solutions do compromise women. You take a risk at that. That's at least what I would think is a achievable measure, that you allow them to come into that space to compete. But I think where the decisions are to be made, and I'm sure people who with the purse strings on both sides will agree that you can't compromise. Not in an environment that we're facing, economic challenges, recovery. We don't know what the next couple of years are going to be like.
Absolutely.
I mean, focus on performance, and I think naturally there will be women there.
And Ashwat, I think this is great content for Astro to do this education, celebrating of women leaders, as well as educating men also on why women should be part of the team.
I think this conversation is important. We need more platform, and it somehow reminds me the conversation that we had during World Economic Forum last January. Even in the EU, European Union, they're still facing this kind of challenges, in which somehow women are perceived afraid to embark into ICT journey, or at least tech journey. So this is also means that with Astro AWANI as news and future affairs platform, we are creating more space to close the gap. The most important is to have more dialogue, more engagement, and not just to close the gap with regards to the gender, but also take a look around you in the family of startup. It's just concentrated fully on urban areas, and those who are educated, or at least you have your own money together with you. You don't have any baggage to take those bold action. So imagine this kind of conversation. We close the gap here in the heart of St. Regis and people in Kuala Nerang. Imagine we can close this gap and bring it closer, and that's our role to begin with. Thank you.
Right. Next question. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of it, and you can definitely network later on during lunch. But I'm going to go to the last two questions, which I think is quite interesting. So the first one, I think, is by Marina Mahathir. How important is the political environment to the success of female entrepreneurs? Our current environment can be very misogynistic. Do we ignore it or carry on? Or is it a barrier to our advancement?
Oh, I love this. Who wants to take this on? Anybody, go on, it's okay.
Maybe we should ask the person who asked the question.
Well, she wants an answer. Okay, somebody up there.
My short answer is you can't ignore it, right? You can't, but you have to have solutions for it.
Dato', I guess I would love to touch on that. But your question is how important is the political environment? First, the one who created the environment is politicians. And politician is the least trusted jobs in Malaysia. I'm so sorry. So let's focus on our strength, build it ground up, and let's hit and create that wave in which they can't deny. That's all. I agree, totally agree. Then they reflect.
In the definition, politicians to policymakers.
Thank you.
I think having great policy support is really, really necessary for us as a community, as a society to advance and to solve this problem. We should make paternity leave mandatory. We need to put that on an equal footing. We need to make, the backbone of our families and society, which is the family unit, a shared piece of work, instead of just, unpaid work by women. All those things, it can't be solved by technology alone. It has to come from a policy level.
Absolutely. You want to add to that? Are you happy?
I want to share with the entrepreneurs how Alibaba value, or how it comes to such a big company, a good company within 20, 30 years. One of the things is that we really value our values. There are 6 values, and every half a year when we do our self-review or our boss review us, 50% of our score goes to our values. And one of the value which I want to share is if not when, if not now, when, if not you, who.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. Not
That's
now.
a nice closing sentence, yeah. So I think that's the last of our questions, and in the interest of time, if you have any more questions during lunch, please approach the panelists, please approach any one of us if you have any questions, and keep the conversation going.
So I think with that, we can bring this wonderful session to a close. I would like to thank each and every one of you to have brought such unique insights, tips, and advice to our team and our people out here. And one thing that I'm hearing from you guys is that actually it's not just about a women problem. It's actually a whole society challenge that we have to embrace together. And rather than look at it as a risk, we should actually look at it as huge opportunities for us to actually, make sure that women are a vital part of the solution making. And, there is a saying that women hold up half of the sky. And in this case, I hope that we will make sure that men and women working together would be able to go and deliver the promise of the genders. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panel members. Thank you so much.